Napoleon Bonaparte. When you hear that name, what comes to mind? The brilliant tactician? The ruthless emperor? The man who conquered Europe? Well, today we're going to look at Napoleon through a completely different lens, as someone who both mastered and misused the ancient philosophy of Stoicism. Think about it. Here's a man who could sleep just 4 hours a night and still run an empire. Someone who could keep his cool while thousands of cannons were firing around him. A leader who seemed to embody that famous Stoic teaching. Focus only on what you can control. Ignore everything else. But Napoleon's story isn't just about victory and conquest. It's also a warning about what happens when ambition goes unchecked. See, while he mastered certain Stoic principles like self-discipline and emotional control, he completely ignored others, like accepting fate and knowing when enough is enough. And ultimately, that's what brought him down. By the end of this video, you'll understand the fascinating paradox of Napoleon's relationship with Stoicism. More importantly, you'll learn powerful lessons about success, power, and self-mastery that are just as relevant today as they were 2 centuries ago. But first, let's look at how this young artillery officer from Corsica used Stoic principles to become one of the most powerful men in history. Let's start with what might be his most impressive quality: his absolutely insane self-discipline. We're talking about a man who worked 18-hour days and thought sleeping was a waste of time. While his soldiers were resting, Napoleon would be up late into the night, personally reading every military report, writing detailed battle strategies, and studying the philosophies of great leaders who came before him. And this wasn't just about working hard. Napoleon had this laser-like focus on preparation. He once said, "Space I can recover, time never." He lived by this idea that success comes from preparing for every possible scenario before it happens. There's a famous story of his officers finding him alone at 3 a.m., surrounded by maps and reports, planning out battles that wouldn't happen for months. This connects directly to what Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoic philosophers, taught. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Napoleon took this to heart. He couldn't control when or where he'd have to fight, but he could control how prepared he was when that moment came. But perhaps even more impressive than his work ethic was his emotional control. This is where Napoleon was truly a master of Stoic principles. Picture this. You're in the middle of a massive battle, cannonballs flying everywhere, thousands of lives on the line, and there's Napoleon, completely calm, making complex decisions like he's playing chess in the park. The Battle of Austerlitz is the perfect example. Napoleon deliberately made his army look weak and disorganized. He even ordered a retreat, making his enemies think he was afraid. The entire time, other generals were panicking, but Napoleon kept his cool. Why? Because this was all part of his plan. When the enemy took the bait and attacked, Napoleon sprung his trap and won one of his greatest victories. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But here's where it gets really interesting. Napoleon's most Stoic quality was probably his absolute focus on what he could control. The guy had zero interest in luck or fate or any of that. Bad weather, find a way around it. Outnumbered, change the strategy. There's actually a quote from him that sounds like it could have come straight from a Stoic philosopher. The strong man is the one who, in moments of crisis, keeps his reason clear. But like all great figures in history, Napoleon's strength became his greatest weakness. And here is where his story takes a darker turn. Remember all those Stoic principles that made Napoleon great? Well, there was one major force that eventually overpowered all of them: his ego. See, Napoleon didn't just believe he could win, he believed he was destined to win. He started buying into his own legend, and that's when things started to fall apart. The invasion of Russia in 1812 shows this perfectly. Every advisor told him it was a bad idea. The supply lines would be too long, the Russian winter was brutal, and the Russian army wouldn't fight him head-on. But Napoleon, who'd won so many impossible battles before, couldn't imagine failing. He marched over 400,000 men into Russia. Want to know how many made it back? Fewer than 40,000. This is exactly what the Stoic philosopher Seneca warned about when he said, We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Napoleon's imagination of his own invincibility led to very real suffering. But here's where Napoleon really went against Stoic teaching. He could never accept defeat. Now, one of the core Stoic principles is amor fati, love of fate. It means accepting whatever happens and working with it, not against it. But Napoleon, after being exiled to the island of Elba, he escaped, raised another army, and tried to retake power. And what did that get him? Waterloo, his final crushing defeat. You see, a true Stoic knows that sometimes retreat is the wisest move. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, sometimes obstacles are actually showing you a better path. But Napoleon couldn't see that. He was so focused on power that he couldn't accept any other path. And that brings us to his final break with Stoic philosophy. He started seeing power as the end goal, not as a means to serve others. Look at Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor of Rome, but he saw his power as a duty, a responsibility to serve his people. Napoleon. By the end, he was treating people like pieces on a chessboard. Old allies, loyal friends, everyone became a tool to serve his ambition. No surprise that eventually, many of these same people turned against him. Here's the thing about power. Like fire, it can illuminate or consume. It can forge strength or burn everything to the ground. Napoleon started as its master, but in the end, he became its fuel. So here we are, Napoleon Bonaparte, one of history's greatest strategists, a man who reshaped Europe through sheer force of will. But his story isn't just some dusty history lesson. It's a masterclass in the power and dangers of how we use certain principles in our own lives. Think about it. This man mastered some of the most crucial skills anyone can develop, his insane work ethic and self-discipline. That shows us success isn't about talent alone. It's about showing up every single day and putting in the work. His emotional control under pressure. That's something we all need, whether we're running an empire or just trying to get through a tough day at work. But Napoleon's downfall, that's maybe the most valuable lesson of all, because it shows us how even the strongest principles can be undermined by unchecked ambition. It's like building a house. You can have the strongest foundation in the world, but if you keep adding floors without limit, eventually the whole thing comes crashing down. So what can we take away from all this? 4 big lessons. First, master yourself before trying to master anything else. Your mind, your emotions, your actions. That's where it all starts. Second, focus on what you can control and forget the rest. Seriously, how much energy do we waste every day worrying about things we can't change? Third, and this is a big one, know when to step back. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't charging forward. It's having the wisdom to retreat, regroup, and rethink your approach. And finally, remember that true power isn't just about conquest. Napoleon conquered Europe, but his empire fell. Because power without wisdom is never built to last. His greatest achievements weren't just his victories. They were the institutions and reforms he built that lasted long after his defeats. The things he created when he balanced power with wisdom. Raw power can conquer, but it takes wisdom to build something that lasts. You know, Napoleon's journey with Stoicism isn't just a historical curiosity. It's incredibly relevant to our modern world. Think about today's business leaders, politicians, and even social media influencers. The same principles that elevated Napoleon and the same pitfalls that destroyed him are playing out right before our eyes. Consider the tech entrepreneurs who show incredible self-discipline, working around the clock to build their companies, or the athletes who maintain perfect emotional control under immense pressure. These modern figures are channeling the same Stoic principles Napoleon mastered. But look closer, and you'll see some falling into the same traps. How many successful people have we watched implode because they couldn't accept limitations? How many built empires only to lose everything because they crossed ethical lines in pursuit of ever more power? The lesson of Napoleon isn't just about what happened in the past. It's a warning for our future. In a world that often celebrates ambition above all else, Napoleon's story reminds us that unchecked ambition isn't strength, it's vulnerability. As Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Napoleon conquered nations, but could never conquer his own desires. And in that failure lies perhaps his most important lesson for all of us. So as you go about your week, I challenge you to reflect on your own relationship with power and ambition. Are you using Stoic principles as tools for genuine growth, or merely as weapons to conquer? Are you building something that serves only your ego, or something that will truly last? The choice, as always, is yours. If you found this exploration of Napoleon's rise and fall through Stoic principles fascinating, then you're going to love our video on Machiavelli's dark wisdom, where we examine another brilliant mind whose ideas on power and leadership continue to influence the world today.